Okay, good afternoon. My name's Dan Vivian. I'm with General Motors, and I want to share a little bit today with you about demystifying analytics. My team at GM was established a few years ago to implement analytics, and so I want to share a little bit in this area about the journey and the things that we've learned, the things that we've experienced in this space around culture, the decision makers, and that network that we have to develop relationships with, and building belief and trust. You heard a lot about that, I think, this morning and early afternoon around that. And share a little bit about a three-step approach that we've piloted. Had some really good success, and then we're trying to roll that out a little more. And then just talk briefly about, we're all change agents here in and around decision intelligence. So culture in the starting point. When I joined GM in 2011, I had the good fortune to meet a gentleman by the name of Dave Vanderveen, who is my lead director now in analytics. And we had the chance to talk, and he shared a lot of the analytical models that GM had developed. And Dave's team in particular, he was leading a team that was at that time in operations or in R&D, and it was an OR team that was in R&D. And when he showed me all these models, I thought, man, this is terrific, that we have all this. And he said, well, yeah, we do, and we've built these analytical models. The challenge and the problem is we haven't really implemented them. We implemented some models and made some effort, but it was pretty random. And so part of this journey is understanding the culture that you're engaging with. And part of that, and the challenge of moving and advancing the implementation of analytics is enterprise anxiety. And so there's, sometimes when you're meeting with these teams and you're trying to introduce a new way and a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at the data and actually making decisions, there's a lot of anxiety, and that anxiety comes from the fear of that you're criticizing the decisions that I've made in the past and the way I've worked and kind of my authority, and the position that I was in. We talk about throwing people under the bus and making enemies. And I don't mean making enemies where we're arguing and fighting every day, but it's just a natural anxiety in human behavior and what I call the casualty of all this. So we're all in the business of, the persuasion business and changing the way the enterprise thinks about how we make decisions and how we can integrate analytics into the business. So I call it a new lens. And the lens is non-critical. So I tell them, we're not here to talk about the decisions you've made in the past and criticize those. We're looking forward. And you really have to have that philosophy. And it's really an opportunity for collective impact and influence. My team working with business decision makers and other functions and really leveraging the power of analytics. So culture and understanding the culture and the people and the behavior around that is really, really important to success. So then you have to also then understand who are all the business decision makers in the enterprise. And if you're like my team, we're in the product development space. We work with engineering functions and divisions, manufacturing, product planning, sales and marketing, finance. It's a very diverse cross-functional team. But you need to understand and know who those business decision makers are and develop a relationship. And you have to spend time with them to help them understand analytics, help them understand how you're trying to change the culture in a very positive way that it is enabling for them and help them, make better decisions. So how can the analytics help them be more efficient, have deeper customer or business insights with greater certainty? So when I have this last statement here, that it's about getting the right people to listen at the most opportune time, what I have found, we have been engaging in a focused implementation of analytics for over 2 years. And it's a repeated effort that you have to make. And it's kind of 360. You meet with certain people, you share certain information, you meet with a related team, you share slightly different information, You have to have a sensitivity to the response and the behavior and the body language that you're receiving from the team or the people that you meet with. And you may not get a positive response. They most likely won't embrace it completely, for sure, the first time, but you have to stay with it and have this repeated engagement. And then eventually, the opportunity to demonstrate the benefits of analytics and the power of analytics will present itself, or at some point, if they don't engage with you, they may get themselves into a situation where they're either desperate or the approach that they've taken multiple times just still did not deliver the results that they want. And then they'll eventually start reaching out to us. Paul Ballou this morning talked about the push-pull. And much of the energy and effort that I've made and my team has made has been somewhat more of a push. But most recently, I'd say in the last 6 months, the pull and the push have started to balance out. And now we're starting to get more pull than we can really manage as a team, which is a good thing. And you know that point will come. And then that gives you the opportunity to decide how much you want to grow your team and how fast. Once you get past the culture and the business decision makers, it boils down again to building trust in the analytics. And it's trust around the data, it's trust around the process, the methods, the approach. We've had situations where we're meeting with the same functional area, and one group says this is, the methods are too complex, and then another group will say it's too basic. And the folks who are basic are more the analytical types who might have had a deeper background, either masters or PhDs in one of the STEM curricula. But all these things tend to get questioned, and all these elements here are where we have to spend a lot of time building beliefs. And again, it's repetition and it's patience to share some of the foundational elements of analytics. No one as a business decision maker will ever have enough time to have a deep knowledge in the analytics and the math and all the really deep thinking type work that my team does. But it's important to have the patience and help them think through it to the point where they become comfortable working with us. There is always an element of blind faith, right? If you're doing analytics and it's giving recommendations for us, for example, of how to content a vehicle, that vehicle isn't going to hit the market for another 3 years. So at some point, the people you're working with and the decision makers have to have a little bit of trust in the team and some faith in the team, but eventually you get the knowledge base and have the opportunity to have some closed loop learning. In many of the areas that we're working in today, we haven't gotten to the closed loop point yet, so there's some blind faith. And then we've had a lot of discussions around if you can bring me some insight, some new insight, that would really be beneficial to me. A lot of this stuff that I think I already know, that's not so helpful. So when we do bring what we consider insight that is contrary to the decisions and the thoughts that what they believe is the right decision in the past, now the feedback we get is, well, that's not intuitive, and I don't trust it, and I don't believe it. But now we have to have the conversation. You want insight, we believe this is insight, and then we have to talk through it. Sometimes you may have to just disengage, let it settle for a little bit, and circle back. But it's always a really interesting dynamic in a study in human behavior that when you ask for insight and insight is in front of you and it's not intuitive, then it's not really insight, and we're stuck in this do loop. But we're working our way through it, and you keep smiling as we walk through it. So when you look at those three things and our engagement with the different functional areas, I can tell you the first time we met with one of our teams to review the results of an analytical model, to say it didn't go very well would be a bit of an understatement. We had great data, we thought we had great insight, and it was the first engagement that we had with any of our functional teams. And I would say the data that we reviewed with this team it was about content optimization and customer priorities. And the one feature that we were discussing was a highly emotional feature just generally in our company. And that was the first thing we reviewed. So we had a little bit of anxiety about these three other, the things that I talked about earlier, and then we come right out of the chute talking about a very sensitive feature. And the results were not intuitive to them. So we spent probably the whole day on one slide, 7 or 8 hours. We couldn't get past the first data point, couldn't get past the conversation. And so as we went through this for about a year, we stepped back and asked the question, we're not experts in data formatting and graphical interface, and we're all pretty good at communication, I would say. So in partnership with one of our market research teams, they have a partner that specializes in data acquisition and how to communicate. They're kind of a consulting company, but not really. And so we reached out to them and partnered with our market research team to ask for help. And so we engaged with this outside consultant, if you will, and they came in and talked with us. And we put together a 3-step approach. And the first step is what we call pre-communication. And it's, getting time? Okay. So the main purpose of the pre-communication was to just explain the process, meet with the team, explain the process, the different steps, and what information we really need from them and how we're going to be gathering this information from them. Then step 2 was the pre-analysis. So we're collecting data, we're doing our analysis and the research, and eventually we're going to have some analytical results. Key point here is sharing with them and reassuring them that analytics is not the sole input. It still requires human interaction and human intelligence to make decisions and bring this all together. And then finally, when we got to the steps of results and recommendations, we recapped all the work that we did. And we've been working recently with a neuroscientist to talk about peak performance and how human behavior works and reacts to different types of approaches. And one of the things that he shared with us, it's really important to make sure you talk about what you've done. Because from a human perspective, it's kind of a sense of accomplishment. So we talk about all the great work that our partners have done with us and what we've completed, reconfirm the objectives and the approach, and then we talk about today, this is what we're going to share. The results, we're going to provide some initial direction on areas of opportunity, gather your input, refine some of those recommendations, and explore other scenarios. It's not the analytics is going to replace you. We don't need you. You just need to press a button on a computer and we're done. So this has really made a tremendous difference, and we're going to roll this pilot out and extend it to other models in our approach. So in the end, we're all change agents here. You've heard throughout the day that everybody's kind of on the forefront here. And it's really, I look at it as I was in a presentation recently, and they talked about the difference between resuscitation and resurrection. And resuscitation is really taking all the previous work you've done and bring more energy and try to apply it. Where resurrection, which I believe is what analytics is bringing a new approach, a new way of thinking, a new way of implementing, and changing the culture of the business. Much more difficult, much harder to build belief in that, but it's doable, and we've seen tremendous progress here in the last 2 years. And finally, again, working with our neuroscientist, he has always approached that the heart, humans they want to be in the was and the is. That's where, between those 2 points, is where they're most comfortable. Change is not the default position. So you need to spend a lot of time understanding the culture, developing relationships with the decision makers, building the trust in the data and the approach and the analytics, not make them experts, but just make them comfortable enough where they will trust you, and then eventually you'll get their minds wrapped around it, and it'll be part of your culture and a part of your approach. So that's what we've learned, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to share.